Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Mr. Bill Diamond.
Woo. First one in the morning, huh? You all awake yet?
Got a late night Bills game.
Oh, okay. That's tonight.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
That's right.
Alright.
So right off the bat, Mr. Diamond, you've had an unbelievable career in show business, television, movies, all that sort of thing. How'd you get your start?
Oh, parents told me to get out. No, actually, I was always interested in film and TV, of course, growing up. There was nobody in our family that was connected with any of it. But it was the TV film side that I was really interested in, lighting, of course, all of that. Outside of what, and I always drew, and I was interested in puppets, but I started with stop motion. We did a lot of stuff with, back then it would be 8mm. We used to get a magazine called Famous Monsters, and they used to have a film thing for young filmmakers, because there was nothing else out there. So, thinking you were the only filmmakers at that point with an 8mm camera, and you were making a movie. Meanwhile, there's like people in LA that are doing the same thing. Dennis Mull from Star Wars, or Steven Spielberg was making his own little 8mm movies and stuff like that. So it was the thing that we would do when we would send them in, and just to get your face in the magazines and see who would, it's like the first little film festival thing. But my first film in New York, I entered in the Albany, I guess it was the film contest that Albany had. And I did a stop motion movie called Roscoe the Cricket. And I loved the process, and I won an award for it. But stop motion was just not where I wanted to be. It took too long. So to me, I wanted instant stuff. And as video cameras were getting more affordable to, they're still, $10,000, but affordable meaning that, you either went from the Super 8 to that. And it was all experimental at that point.
Understood. Just so I understand this correctly, you are a New York boy born and raised?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. That's me as a Canadian saying that, of course, but it's all right. So let's fast forward a little bit here. So you got your start with stop motion, and 1976, you finally started your own company. So what were some of the first projects you were working on at the time?
Somebody's done his homework. So I was doing a lot of commercial work for different companies at that time. I also was working with a guy named Joe Cipollone, who worked for Children's Television Workshop. But at the same time, he was also doing stuff for NBC. So I was, back then, all the machines were huge video machines, 2-inch quads, 1-inch, and they would be almost as big as this table. And you had to align the heads and the reels, because there was no editing. If you were doing it in film, you had to cut the tape, okay, and stripe it. In film, we would wind up editing. So I did a lot of work with him, learning how to work those machines, pushing them around, helping him, doing that kind of thing, and doing industrial commercials. That led me to what the work we did at Sesame Street was more on the video side, and that's how I met Carol Spinney from that process. I didn't meet Jim until a little later.
Gotcha. So going into that Sesame Street sort of thing, I remember in some of your touring exhibits in years past, you would bring a Big Bird puppet, and this year you have Oscar the Grouch at your booth.
Right.
So, from what I understand about the design of the Big Bird puppet, it's a full body puppet. It's a very bizarre sort of thing to have to operate. So I understand that there's a mechanism with the eyes that you use a pinky finger and all that sort of thing. So were you involved, and how involved were you at the time when it came to puppet design?
I got to learn puppet design and puppetry from Kermit Love. Kermit Love was the guy who built Big Bird. Yeah. No connection with Kermit the Frog. Yes, Kermit, they both had the same name, but he wasn't named after him, so that people are like, oh, that's where Kermit's named after. It had nothing to do with it. But Kermit Love is the guy who built Big Bird. And he had a puppetry company in Great Jones Street. He also did Space Coasters. He built all Gary Canoe and all that for Space Coasters. So, and a number of other people were there, like Noah McNeil, or Noah was a little bit later. And that, I learned a lot from Kermit Love.
Interesting, okay. So you worked with, obviously Sesame Street, one of the biggest cultural phenomena to ever come out of public broadcasting. And then later on in the 1980s, you had a much stronger relationship with, Jim Henson projects, especially I know Fraggle Rock and Dark Crystal. And I've got to ask, because looking historically at Jim Henson's stuff, he's typically a very family-oriented sort of guy. And then all of a sudden Dark Crystal comes out, and it's one of the most radically different things he ever did. Working on a project like that, seeing the character designs, did you have a lot of confidence in the idea of starting out?
Well, nobody really knew. That was a 5-year project. Nobody really knew what Jim was up to. He had met Brian Froud over in London while I was dealing there with the Muppet Show,
Okay.
and Froud was really incredible illustrator and loved the style. Dark Crystal really wasn't. He knew we wanted to do something there. Everybody says, well, we did a lot of children's shows. Jim was more interested in making the films. Sesame Street was a phenomenon that gave him
The means to
do what he wanted to do. And then he was so into, creating this world with the Muppets. But his real source is he wanted to make TV and film. Muppets came along because that was the vehicle for him to do, which has really been our vehicle too. So when Dark Crystal came about, he really wanted to be a filmmaker. So the Muppets was his way of doing it. Dark Crystal was his ultimate element of design. So he had lots of designers, a lot of people working on it. And he had a lot of builders. Jim really didn't build anything at all. He didn't build anything except for the early days of Sam and Friends. Him and Jane did. But when Don Saline came in, who gave the original look to the Muppets, Jim really kind of got out of it. He was the idea guy at that point.
Interesting, okay. So, just another sort of question based on Dark Crystal and the Fraggle Rock connections. I know they were both filming at the same time. Fraggle Rock was filmed in Toronto, again, Canadian boy, whereas Dark Crystal's being filmed, I believe, was it either California or in England?
It was in
England. So because you worked on both projects, I know you did a couple episodes of Fraggle Rock, different things. Being on set at all, were you ever doing
I was on
things
set for Dark Crystal, but everything
Gotcha.
started out of Manhattan. Okay, Jim's main office was in Manhattan, and that's where I was.
Gotcha.
Okay, he had a workshop upstairs and he had downstairs, and he had his offices were there. That's where the brownstone is really where everything came from. And there was we had a carriage house. There was a building down the street. It used to be where carriages came out with the horses, and they turned it into a small studio. All development came out of that building.
Gotcha.
Until he built the Creature Shop in London, which was an old post office. And he bought the building in London, and he was filming the Muppet Show at L Street Studios, which is also where Star Wars was being done too, and Pine Bush. So all that stuff was being done over there, but it all originated in New York. When it came up here, it was shot in Canada because he was making a deal with HBO. Remember, most of these TV shows were turned down by all the networks.
Yeah.
And the reason he went to London was because nobody here wanted it.
Interesting.
Okay, so ABC, CBS, all of them turned Jim down on the Muppet Show, because he wanted 7:30, 8 o'clock. They wanted Saturday morning, and nobody thought he could fit. And when he went over to London, he was doing other stuff. It was Lord Garth was the head of the BBC. He's the one who said, "Oh, I hear you want to do it." Shook his hand, and that's how the Muppet Show was shot there. If you look at the Muppet Show, the first year is all British actors. Okay, most people don't. Then it was traded to be here for ABC, when they said, "Okay, we'll send you the Muppet Show, Benny Hill, and many other things," and did a trade to the U.S. That's how it got here. And then the networks took it because they wanted everything else, like Benny Hill, and they wanted everything else to trade out, and that's how they did it, and that's how it got on at 7:30 on ABC.
So I didn't know the major networks turned down a
Oh,
guy
yeah.
with such a proven
Jim was
track
turned
record of
down
success.
all the time. He was turned down for Fraggle Rock. All right. He was making a deal with the CCTV, your CCTV up here. Yeah, well,
CTV, yeah.
Yeah. So he was having a deal there, and that's how Fraggle Rock came here.
Gotcha.
It was slated not for Canada. It was slated, but the best deal was with Canada at that time. He was doing other things, and he was doing a lot of commercial work at that point. And all the networks, all the movie studios constantly turned him down. You would think that that was not the case, but it's no different than now.
Absolutely. Just a funny thing about Fraggle Rock, and we'll move on here. There was the first show from the Western television zeitgeist, I guess, that was shown in the Soviet Union, which I think is one of the funniest things in the world. They turn on Western television and that's what they see. I don't know. So moving away from the Jim Henson connection, obviously something that played a very big part in your life, at least in your career. You met Marty P. Robinson working on Sesame Street, I assume, and I understand the two of you started doing Little Shop of Horrors as an off-Broadway production. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, he did it in off-Broadway. That was Marty. When it was going on tour in the 80s, around 82, 83, they, Westchester Broadway Theater was doing the first tour. They launched it there and they would tour it. Marty was really pretty much out of it at that point because he was so involved with Sesame Street. They came to me to build the puppets, and that's how it happened. So it really had nothing to do with Marty at that point. He was just the first designer on it for the off-Broadway show. But once that closed, it sat there, and Alan Menken started doing wanted to take it on tour. And he made an alliance because he's from Yorktown with Westchester Broadway Theater in New York, and decided that, you know, we'll launch it there and then we would tour it, and that's how it happened.
Interesting, okay. Personal projects you were working on at the time, so let's say late 80s, early 90s. I know you were starting to branch out, producing some of your own television shows. You were getting a lot more involved with different projects as well. Are there any that you don't get to speak about very much that you have some fond memories of, or is there a story you've always wanted to tell that you've never had the opportunity?
Well, we did a show called Stuffy's Place, which was a lot of fun. We did that for quite a while. Johnny Henson worked on that show with me. So I had Johnny, after Jim died, Johnny was going back and forth, and he actually co-directed the show with me. That was a regional show, lower, but at the same time in '96, I was in Rochester, in Fox in Rochester, which you would get in Canada because it was Superstation. I did Dr. Rupp's Dinosaur Adventure.
Interesting.
And that was a full show that I created, like Stuffy's Place. It had no Henson connection at that point. It was also, we used to tour all our shows live. So when malls were coming in, you could go to, you know, in Rochester Mall, you could go here. I did malls up here. When the malls were becoming a hit, they were starting to bring celebrities in. So my touring shows were live at all the malls around the country. And it was me, Ricky Schroeder from Silver Spoon, and Desi Arnaz Jr. all doing
Desi
these.
Jr.
We were all doing these malls. Mall was a place. So we would do a TV show. You could watch the show that night and you could see us live at the mall. We toured a lot for years, or like till malls, you know, started dying off.
As a music nerd, I gotta ask you about Desi Jr. in a minute, but let's focus on obviously your own career here. So things obviously went very well for you, I would say, in film and television. You had a lot of gigs lined up, you've had your hand in a lot of projects. Let's fast forward to 2001. I understand there was a tragedy at your warehouse.
Oh, yeah, we forget about that. Yeah.
Okay, so
We
let's
don't
move on.
forget about it, but no, it's fine. I just never think about that in the history book, but everybody brings it up. Yeah, we've gone against everything, even fire, floods, you know, so. Yeah, we lost 250 characters in that fire. Now, it was really funny. No one was hurt. It happened. We were in a building that was a Masonic temple. Our TV studio was upstairs in the side because it was big. and we were doing industrial work for Caterpillar, and we were taking Caterpillar execs and we were putting them into Star Trek. We were working with Universal doing Indiana Jones. We put them in. We built these sets, and we were doing this all around the country for the corporation, and their head show. So we were just finished filming a whole big Star Trek thing for that corporation, and they played all the characters. It was in an in-house production, but
Gotcha.
they made a lot of money doing it. That night, it was January. It was very cold. I remember that. I was home when the mayor called me and said, "Oh, your building's on fire." And we raced down there 2 in the morning. They were putting it out. What happened was the city owned the building. When we upgraded the electricity upstairs, they never upgraded next to the Paramount, and they never upgraded down below. If you owned it, they would have made you do it. But they owned it, they didn't want to spend the money, and it really was, when the furnace turned on, the old wiring took the building out.
Oh my goodness.
So we would watch it burn. I used to watch, and there's an article from the New York Times of me standing out and they see the building and burning in the back, and they had all the cameras, 2 o'clock in the morning, all there because it was a story. And in there, you could literally see the puppet shop, and you could see where the puppets were, and the bright glow of each one on the thing. They were going up, and he said, "Well, what do you think seeing the puppets burning behind you? How do you feel?" And I said, "This is my way of firing everybody." And they printed it. That's exactly what he said. So I said, "I built it once, I'll build it again." And that was the little comic story about it. And then when we were on tour, at the same time, so all the stuff that was on tour, they were like up in about 20 miles away. We had a storage thing, so a lot of the originals were in there. Even though we lost 250 characters, we still had like stuffing or the chew. All of it, because it was a touring show, we had another storage container, and that's what survived.
Right on.
From there, we were still touring. It never stopped. We had bookings to do. And when I walked into Caterpillar that morning, all these executives in a boardroom, I came in, they all had the newspaper article on the front page about the fire. And we were supposed to go into editing at that point. And their thing had to be ready by Friday. They put a lot of money in it. It's all gone. So I walked in, and they're all and they're like, "We're really sorry, Bill. Don't worry about what you had to do. It's fine. We'll find a way to make all this happen." And I said, "Well, great, thanks, but we have a show to do Friday." They're like, "Yeah, but it's all gone." "But not your show. It was in our backpack when we walked out of the studio. So we just had to go get it edited." And I was still there on Friday. We still mounted the show. We still showed all the videos. We did everything we needed to do. We never missed the boat, even though the studio was gone.
Jeez.
So we just kept going. So,
Dedication. I mean, I can't imagine watching anything I have just go up and then continuing on work like that.
oh, we had
That's
bookings,
remarkable.
and then we walked in, and what was really funny is, I guess the people that were building the sets for that show, they were late. They were late. They weren't on time for this event. I was sitting there, everything was ready to go on our end, and the president of the company is furious at this company because they were off. And the guy was giving, "Well, trucks broke down," or whatever. He said, "There's only one person in this room that has an excuse. That guy back there, his whole studio burned down. You look, see?" And he's pointing. There you go. He lost everything, and he's still here with the project, so you're fired after this. They gave me all that work. We built their sets from then on.
Jeez.
So I guess it worked out.
I
So that's how you fight. He got fired too. And I fired the puppets, so we're good.
I admire your tenacity. I don't know what else to say. So let's move somewhat away from puppets and let's move into one of your more current projects, hence the name of the panel. How on earth did you get involved with the Terrifier series? This seems like such a departure from everything else you've ever done.
Well, I've always been involved with horror, independent films and things like that. Outside of that, we always shot. I mean, a lot of stuff I did with, we have the puppets, Monster TV. So horror was always there. Little Shop of Horrors was always in. We were building things for other people and designing for independent. I was just finished a film with Dan Roebuck. Dan played Grandpa Munster in Rob Zombie's and many other movies. And I just built stuff for that movie. Tony Todd was in it. The movie's not out, it comes out this year. And I was coming to, I knew who Damien was, I knew who Art the Clown was. So I was in Canada for Fright Man.
Ah, it's one of my local conventions.
Right.
Okay, here we go.
And this is going back 3 years. Yeah, 3 years. And they were all there, and we were in the back with all the setup. But I came into the Marriott, and Danny said, Damien wants to talk to you, the guy that's doing these Terrifier movies. And I'm like, okay, all right, why? He said, well, talk to him. So when they were in makeup and doing the prep for Terrifier, Danny, he was asking Danny, who did his stuff for his movies, built that diving bell and all that other stuff. And he said, well, if you want anything done, go see Bill Diamond. So that, when I walked in, Damien was in the lobby and said, can we talk? And we went to the bar, had a beer, and that's how Terrifier happened, right in the lobby of the Marriott.
Interesting, okay. So again, as a Niagara Falls local, I know exactly what hotel you're talking about. That
right,
is
the Marriott on the Fall. So
that
Damien
is
and I
remarkable.
sat there, and then I said, come to the studio, and him and Phil came to the studio in New York, and they fell in love with it. And I was only supposed to do a little piece of it.
okay.
And it grew and grew and grew, and I wound up doing the whole, pretty much 80% of the film.
Gotcha. That's remarkable. So before we open the floor to questions from our audience here, do you have any upcoming projects that you might want to
Actually,
use some teasers to?
we launched one, sorry.
There you go.
We launched one Friday.
Oh.
We have our own channel, BDP Plus, and we're doing a premiere. We shot a little thing for it here yesterday. The series, it's about 30 episodes for the next couple of years on Basil Gogo's King of the Monsters. So we have many people on it, like Rob Zombie and all that. Basil was the guy who did the famous monster covers, and I'm his executor of all his art. And we were going to do a documentary when he died, but the world kind of went crazy at that time. It got shut down, so that kind of stopped that. So we had an idea to shoot this show. One of our producers are right there, Tiffany. And that show launches Friday. We do a kickoff. You can watch it next weekend on BD Plus. We'll give you a card how to see it. Half-hour show. Corey Ackerman, who's not with us anymore. Basil, Victoria Price, and the Jim Warren, who was the publisher, is still around. So it's really how that magazine covered and how Basil that. And then it goes on and on and on and on to everybody that loved that magazine. Rob Zombie, Tim Burton. Wish I had water. I'm water there. And that comes out. We're premiering it at Monster Bash on Friday, and we all fly that night to LA, and we're at Son of Monster Palooza kicking it off at the same time, but then you can download it and watch it.
Sounds very interesting, and clearly you've got a really busy week coming up, so best of luck and safe travels to you. So we've got a microphone down the center aisle here. If anyone has any questions for Mr. Diamond, please hop on. The microphone should be turned on. Worst case scenario, I can indulge my interest, and we just talk about Fraggle Rock for the next 15 minutes.
So hard to ask questions, but we went to the Steel City Comic Con and saw a couple of the cast members, right, from Terrifier, David Thornton. They seemed really, I don't know, very down to earth. And I don't know if you have any comments. Have you had, your opportunities and interactions with them? We were really impressed with them.
We were just all out at Frank for Universal Horror Nights. We kicked that off. So when Terrifier became, a phenomenon, which they never expected, lightning in a bottle. Damien did. When we were doing that movie, I always turned around and I say to them, and I said, yeah, that's because you hired me. Now you have a phenomenon. So I joke with Damien all the time. Just joking. Yeah. And he said, I should have had you on the other two movies. I said, well, you didn't have a big enough budget. So you would have never got me. No, I can't. joke. That's what I say to him. But anyway, I think because Damien had the pulse of the fans, and the fans had the pulse of Terrifier is why it happened. Nobody could predict that. Matter of fact, all the studios didn't want it. He's had every offer and he won't go that way. But Universal kind of showed you the popularity of how that is. And yes, they're just all down to earth guys.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of fun creating something that when 2 came out, they just kind of realized, but it took them so long to do it, 2 years to put 2 out, that 3 was such a gamble for them. A $2 million budget. It's made over $100 million. They never knew. So I was telling them at that point when I was just, we were actually here when the movie came out. And we could see the numbers go off. And I was remembering the fun because I was here and Bill Shatner was talking to me. And he was just so interested in how this money was being made out of this clown all of a sudden. And nobody knew. I said, well, we'll see what it does. And it just kept going. So they got caught up in this phenomenon. And then when Universal called us and said, we want to do, Frightmare, not keep my eyes on Frightmare, but Horror Nights at Universal. Damien and Phil couldn't believe it. And they cut the deal with Universal. And we did the red carpet there, what was it, like 3 weeks ago? I don't know. We're lost. We've been all over the map. So, Vegas and whatever. So I flew out there. I had a show in Buffalo. I flew out there to do the red carpet with David and Phil and Universal. We had fun doing that. And they did it there, not Orlando, because there's one in Orlando. The Levy's just the Orlando one.
Okay.
So, but once you see that, the way that happened was when they did Horror Nights last year, everyone was wearing Terrifier shirts. They're like, we gotta do this. So that's when Damien realized, when that became a live event at Universal, it's the hottest independent film of its time. That's when he realized it.
Yeah. You should have seen, make sure nobody's behind me, you should have seen the turnout. It was packed. Now, we do have a Bills game tonight, so I think that's where everybody is today. But it was packed, and David Thornton mentioned how they did not expect how it exploded the way it did. Very popular, yeah.
I would go to cons after that and call David and Phil and go, I know you're at, because they used to sit at a con, and nobody knew who they were. They were just trying to get to know us. And then 2 kind of opened the books again, and then 3 just went through the roof. So, I turned to him and I said, you have no idea what you have here. Being involved with things that lightning happens in the bottle. Fortunately for me, about 6, 7 times. This was their first experience. I said, walk around, see the vendors, see how much Art the Clown is moving forward. They had a sense, but they were very worried about the 3rd film. They thought it would do okay. I kept on saying, I think you guys are going to have something here, because I'm watching, I'm at all the cons. And then, we were at the premiere and we could just see it. It just became that phenomenon.
Thank you. Thanks
You're welcome.
If I may just speak a bit more of that, I remember a couple of years ago I was working Comic-Con in Niagara Falls, and that was the first time they had all the cast together. I think this is just before the 3rd one had started shooting.
Yeah, that's the one I was at.
That's
where
right.
all this happened.
Oh, okay. So I was bartending at the hotel party that night. Anyway.
Probably were sitting in front of you talking.
But I remember when I watched this group of people come in, and I just thought they're just people here from the convention, hanging out, whatever. We're shooting the breeze about this, and they're just some of the most polite people I've ever met. And they're like, I'm just like, what's your name? Oh, my name's David. And what do you do? He says, oh, I'm Art the Clown. And I'm like, you're what? But I remember even the early days, I had never seen the first Terrifier movie, and all of a sudden, Art of Art started showing up. And I thought, that's really interesting. What is this? And I saw the movie and didn't sleep for 3 nights. But I'm in that same kind of boat. I saw, I'm like, this is going to be big. I never thought even the third movie, like you were saying, they're worried about it. Typically, the third movie can kind of make or break a series. This one is probably the biggest movie of the three. It's remarkable. And if you don't mind asking, how exactly did you become an associate producer on this?
Dave, that was them. Damien and Phil came to me and said, "You have done so much in this film." Matter of fact, Damien could say, "You're in everything." Even on the Christmas thing, if you look over the chair, there's a diamond on this over Arthur Clown. I don't know if you ever noticed it. So I put it there when we built the set and put it in the mall. And I built the chair and I said, "Oh, we need something back there," so I put my logo there. Damon didn't know I did that until we had it on set, and he walked over to me and he said, "Ah, I see what you did there." When they went to Universal, before Phil and Damien did to see everything, they sent me a picture going, "You've made it big, your chair is here at Universal." Now I own the real chair, so Universal duplicated it. And they were sending me pictures. Diamond hits Universal big time in Terrifier. They sent me a photo of the chair when they did the Christmas thing. The chair has a diamond on it in Universal and in California. And I laughed and I said, "And now you know why I did that." So when we did that Christmas set, we're shooting the mall. We built it and we put it in there. And we put it in there and people were coming up, "What are we filming?" They didn't see Art the Clown yet. And why, it was like, I think it was February, May? And Christmas was over with when we were doing it. And people wanted to know why Christmas was going back up early in the year. And people were watching, the balcony was open. The mall was active when we were ready to film this thing. And we're all telling everybody that it's a vegan mayonnaise commercial that we're doing for Christmas. Until Art the Clown came out and that destroyed that theory. But then Damien would constantly say, "Hey Bill, could you do this? Could you do that?" And then started filming in the studio. And we built I designed the health set, I designed all the houses. And while they were shooting on Long Island at the house, they were running out of time. They only had 3 weeks. And the house was extremely small, but I would get a message from Phil Dignan, "Could you see if you could get Bill to build maybe the corner of the bedroom for me? I'll shoot it at the studio. Do you think you can get Bill to build, maybe design the window of the house just so we can run out of time, very small?" And I said, "Why don't I just build the whole house for you and you get out of there?" They ran out of time. We came back, we replicated the house 13 feet in the air because that's how the floor drops. That was already on the slate. And then I built the living room and the dining room. And if you want to see those pieces, there'll be a fright room because we're bringing them to fright room, all the original pieces. So we built the back of the house, the living room, the dining room, and there's a trick. You'll never know which one it is. And Damien said, when I edited this, I couldn't tell where I was, whether I was in the studio or I was in the house. And no one ever is going to know when they shot that, because they seamlessly went together. So the house was built two sets in the soundstage, one set out there. I know, and I'm never going to give that little trick away, I know when it's the house and when it's not.
I think I need to scour this movie and look for little hidden diamonds.
Oh, that you can do. Yeah, they're in there. It's also, they're in there with the Revenge of Leprechaun. I did that.
I had no idea about, oh my god, that's a whole other hour's worth of discussion. Oh my goodness. If we don't have any other questions from the panel, I think there's one I'd just kind of like to end with. And this is more of a personal question, I suppose. You've done so many projects since you started out in late 60s, early 70s. You've been to so many conventions. You've met so many fans of so many different things. I gotta ask, when you look back on your life, is there any moment where you kind of realize, like, hey, this is where I'm supposed to be?
Well, it's a good question. The interesting thing with this new series and Famous, how many people know Famous Monster magazine? you even know of it. Yeah. I figured, I know Alice, so I figured, yeah. And Alice will be in the series at some point. But anyway, the reason I know that is my first convention was 1974 and 5. And I handled an actor, and that's where I met Basil Gogos. But the actor I was with was Peter Cushing. And you know him from Star Wars as Lieutenant
Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah, Tarkin.
He's also Frankenstein.
Well, he didn't play the monster, but yeah, he was Victor.
Yeah, Victor, yeah.
But he also played Van Helsing. So he was known for all the Hammer movies. And so I was with Peter Cushing, and we met there. So now I'm doing a series on famous monsters, where my first convention at 17 was at Famous Monsters. And that's where I met Forey, and I met Jim Warren, and I met Basil Gogos. So here we are, 40 some odd years later, and we're still talking about Famous Monsters. So all these people that grew up on it, and now I'm creating this Famous Monster world. You'll see Damien in there, because you wouldn't have it. Art the Clown, it wasn't from Famous Monsters. So you'll see where conventions started with this magazine, where movie careers, makeup careers, Rick Baker, Tim Burton, all these people that read that magazine came from, like me. So yes, so 1975 to now, and that's where it all starts. The cover of this magazine and how this magazine changed and created the phenomenon you're at now.
It's a very full circle moment. That's absolutely stunning. Again, I don't think we have any questions. Ladies and gentlemen, please a hand for Mr. Bill Diamond.
Hi guys, see up there.
Also, it's my first time moderating a
He
panel.
did great.
So,
Give him a great hand. I think he got a career here.
I hope. Anyway, stick around. We have someone else coming to do the moderating, and I believe it's Friday
They're
15th.
fired. No, you're doing it.
If that's the case, I gotta watch all 3 movies in the next 5 minutes.
Thank goodness for Google. Good job.
Now I get to tell my mom I did this.
Maybe I started another career. There you go.
There he is.